I don't know what we gotta do, but let's make something happen quick. And I mean it because I'm tired of this. I am so tired of working. I'm so tired of us all talking about how tired we are. I'm just tired of this being a habitual pattern. I went as far as to break it down. So let us see. Looking at the fact that we have 7 days a week and 24 hours in a day, that gives us a total of 168 hours in a week. Now let's subtract the average amount, or the suggested average amount of hours worked in a week, which is 40. So 168 minus 40 gives us 128. Now the suggested sleep time is 8 hours a night, so that gives us 56 hours throughout the week that we are supposed to use sleeping. Subtracted from 128, we get 72. Now I'm going to subtract 48 of those hours because the weekend is ours. I'm a firm believer that the weekend is whatever you want to do. Now, that gives us 24 hours, meaning within the 5 days outside of our 48-hour weekend, we have 24 hours to ourselves, meaning we have 4.8 hours a day for ourselves. When 2 of those hours are needed for emotional and mental preparation for the we gotta keep dealing with.
So this TikToker by the name of Rose with Mary points out something that I think we've all felt at a certain point. And that is that we just don't have enough time in the day. That we can't keep up with work. We can't keep up with our social lives. We can't keep up with caring for ourselves, with caring for the environment around us, with taking care of our things like dishes and cleaning up our apartments all at the same time. That whenever we try to master one of these things, the others of these things start falling apart. And there's a very specific reason for this. And it all goes back, actually, to the origin of hourly wages. Now, hourly wages are really interesting because they used to not be the norm. Now, the norm used to be that people would either be paid a salary or they would be paid per thing that they made, right? If it was in a factory, they would be paid a standard rate per item that they would very often negotiate with the owner for, or they would be their own independent worker, small business owner that would set their own prices. Now, within all of that, there's an assumption that's being made. If you're paid a salary, it is assumed that your employer is responsible for your ability to survive. That if they are taking that much of your free time to work for them, that you should also be responsible for their ability to maintain their existence on this earth. Then when it comes to being paid for the work that you're doing, and if you are setting your prices or negotiating your prices, the cost of your living is going to be factored in. I mean, think about it. If I make a chair and I sell the chair, I'm going to set the price of the chair to be based off of not only what I think the chair is worth, but also what I think my time was worth and how much I need to pay rent. Hourly wages completely takes all of that out of the equation. The entire purpose of hourly wages was to completely separate market prices from the cost of labor. And this is another thing that's really important because the implication is very significant. You see, the cost of labor then, if it's completely disconnected from market prices, should never have an impact on inflation. Higher wages shouldn't lead to an increase in inflation because hourly wages are, once again, disconnected from market prices. This was something that was done very intentionally because business owners wanted to be able to ignore the cost of living for their workers. They wanted to push wages down to the extreme so that they could disregard the quality of life of their workers. This allowed them to increase their profit margins substantially. I don't know if you remember the Great Depression, but the fact that people weren't able to afford to survive and they weren't able to afford the things that were being sold at the factories, in part led to the Great Depression. That I think we all know was pretty darn bad. And so the response from the government to this was basically two things. One, it was to put in place more rights for labor unions so that workers could be more involved in negotiating higher wages that would factor in their cost of living. And two, to set a minimum wage that was, in its origin, intended to ensure that one person could afford a family of four. Also, just a side note, all the people who say, oh, minimum wage was never intended for somebody that's managing a family, it was always meant for teenagers as an introductory wage. That's literally not true. It was really originally intended to make sure that you could feed a family of four. Just to be very clear on that front. But now, as time has progressed and the minimum wage hasn't increased, we are finding ourselves in this situation again, where workers are struggling to be able to afford to live. And in struggling to afford to live, we are struggling to find any time where we're not working. You see, the original design of minimum wage made the assumption, and the original design of the 40-hour work week made the assumption that you are going to have somebody who is a stay-at-home parent, who is going to take care of the house, who is going to take care of the kids, so that when you come home, you can actually have free time. And they can have free time from the care work that they're doing. But now we're in a position where if both people in the household are working full-time jobs, and then they have to do the full-time job of taking care of themselves and potentially their children, you find out really quick that people just don't have enough time in the day to do what they need to do to not only survive, but to thrive. On top of that, people lose their ability to do things that are meaningful and give life meaning, things that are joyful, things like reading books, painting, drawing, doing creative things that we all as humans have some desire to do. Whatever it is for you, you have something that is a hobby that you would really love to do that isn't your job. And when you take away that from people, it puts an immense emotional strain on people, and it leads to an extreme amount of burnout.
I can't tell you how many days, how many nights, how many moments in my life throughout the day, several times a day, where I've thought to myself, I cannot do this. I do not understand how this is a realistic, feasible lifestyle to be living. Like, this is not comfortable. This is not realistic. This is bull.
And this burnout is something that collectively we are facing to the extreme. The harsh reality, though, is that so long as we have a capitalist system, so long as the relationship between employer and worker is maintained the way it is, employers will always be pushing for workers' wages to decrease. Employers will always be actively creating the conditions in which the workers are burning out and unable to afford their own existence. That also means that workers will be unable to then afford the products that the employers are trying to sell. Capitalism has this inherent contradiction that lends itself to destroying itself. And so the only long-term solution to this problem right here is to fundamentally change or eliminate the relationship between employers and workers. And by and large, that means a democratic control over the economy, where employers are no longer the dictators of the workplace, but the workers, whether it be through a worker cooperative or democracy, have control over the conditions of their labor and where those profits go to, and additionally have control over their own time.
This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain on the Young Turks Twitch channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to stay up to date with my content, you can follow me at Benjamin Carollo on Twitter. And for those of you that might be wondering or have noticed, my pronouns are in fact she, her.